Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada's asylum system is deeply and fundamentally broken after 10 years of Liberal government. This was not the case 10 years ago, but today Canada's once compassionate asylum claim system has been absolutely ruined and absolutely abused and absolutely made a mess of by this Liberal government. So today I rise to speak to Bill C-12. I will direct my comments to parts 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the bill, which amend the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act, as well as the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. These parts are similar to the immigration provisions contained in Bill C-2. A decade ago, Canada's asylum claim backlog sat at less than 10,000 cases. Today, that backlog sits at several 100,000, with thousands more claims being made every month. While there are many highly persecuted persons around the world who are legitimately seeking refuge in Canada, there are many claims that are currently in that massive backlog that are bogus. Worse, those claims are taking years, not months, not weeks, years to process. And worse, even after being found to have had a bogus claim, an applicant can appeal their process for years more and then not be deported for years after that, if they are deported at all. During this time, bogus claimants can draw social benefits that Canadians don't have access to, like vision care. In effect, over the last decade, the Liberal government has allowed Canada's asylum system to veer far away from the original principles of its design and turned it into a backdoor, skip-the-line economic migration stream, which is not accounted for at all in federal immigration levels planning, including the impact on housing supply, healthcare access, and jobs. This Liberal failure has had many negative impacts, which I will outline today, with the two most noteworthy, I believe, being the destruction of the fairness and compassion of Canada's asylum system, and in turn, the inability of the system to prioritize the world's most vulnerable persons. When the Minister of Immigration claimed that the immigration provisions contained in C-2 and now in this bill would do something about this problem, she said it would improve the flexibility and responsiveness of the asylum system. However, in reality, the immigration provisions of this bill are structured to do one thing: shift the responsibility for addressing Canada's deeply broken asylum system to the courts and away from the Liberal government that broke it in the first place, potentially past the horizon of the next election. As such, it's my assessment that the immigration provisions in this bill are likely to fail without substantive amendment and additional measures to both reduce the incentive for economic migrants to abuse the asylum system, to swiftly remove bogus asylum claimants from Canada, and to restructure this asylum system to ensure that the world's most vulnerable persons do not continue to be let down by the Liberal government. I'll now demonstrate to colleagues and to the IRCC bureaucrats who are listening in the government lobby why this failure is likely to occur and what changes are likely to must be made. To begin, it's important to understand the extent to which Canada's asylum system is broken and how we got to this point, because we can't fix something if we don't understand what the problem is. In 2017, the leader of the Liberal government tweeted, quote, #welcome to Canada, in a tweet that was designed to encourage failed asylum claimants in the United States whose temporary protected status had been revoked via due process to come to Canada instead, and come they did. After that tweet, well over 100,000 people illegally crossed the border into Canada and claimed asylum, many in spite of the fact that they did not have valid asylum claims in the United States, which is considered to be a safe third country. Said differently, if somebody had a failed asylum claim in the United States, they never should have been allowed to claim asylum in Canada after illegally crossing the borders. But the Liberals opened the floodgates in 2017, even putting up infrastructure at the illegal border crossing most used at Roxham Road and instructing RCMP officers to help people with their baggage. In many instances, scammers, unscrupulous consultants, and even human traffickers exploited the system at the expense of the integrity and compassion of Canada's asylum system and the safety of all involved. And the Liberals encouraged this for years. I have been standing in this place for years now saying this, and here we are. At the time, I remembered that the Liberals implied that I was a racist for saying these things. And here we are with Bill C-12 in front of us because of this failure. Well over 100,000 people have entered Canada illegally from the United States since 2015 and claimed asylum. Most have bogus claims, most are still in the processing queue, most have work permits and access to health care, and many have been put up for years in hotels at the taxpayer's expense. At the same time, the Liberals lifted visa requirements from countries that have had a long history of high level of bogus asylum claims, like Mexico, without any plan in place to prevent those claims from skyrocketing again. At that time, I raised many concerns about this issue, which fell again on deaf ears. It's unfortunate because since that time, there have been over 60,000 asylum claims made by Mexican nationals due largely to the visa lift. Most have bogus claims, most are still in the processing queues, and many have also abused the government's payment of hotel rooms for people. It's actually insane. We're here having this debate again. Experts have raised concerns that there are likely many more asylum claims on the way from the record 3 million temporary residents the Liberals allowed into Canada over the past 2 years whose visas are about to expire. Social media posts have encouraged people to attempt to extend their temporary resident permits by making a bogus asylum claim. The result, Canada's asylum claim system is drowning in over 296,000 claims, with average processing times of 29 months or more. At current rates, estimates suggest it could take 25 years to clear the current inventory, while thousands of more claims keep pouring in. The prolonged uncertainty and volume created by this backlog strains resources and also people with valid claims alike. This backlog is failing the world's most vulnerable who actually have real claims of persecution. Nearly $1 billion have been spent by the Liberals on something called the Interim Federal Health Program, which provides benefits to asylum claimants which in some cases Canadians don't even have taxpayer-funded access to. Since this Liberal government came into power, that program has increased in cost by 1,200% because of the backlog in the asylum claim system. This is on top of the billions of dollars that have been spent on providing funding to house asylum claims, many of whom are bogus, in hotels and affordable housing, while Canadians struggle to afford rent. A shocking number of claims do, in fact, appear to be bogus, with news reports revealing nearly identical stories in many applications, hundreds of applications, under one immigration consultant, that had coached them unscrupulously. These often originate from low-risk countries with high volumes of issued temporary visas, serving as a backdoor to extend stays after student or work permits expire. Loopholes abound, easy inland claim, fraudulent labor market impact assessments, and consultants peddling fake persecution narrative for fast-tracked permanent residency. Lax enforcement and limited oversight of immigration consultants have massively exacerbated this problem. The determination process of these claims in itself is inefficient, with inconsistent decisions that plague an already massively clogged system. Some experts suggest that the higher rates of acceptance in recent years are due to a desire by bureaucrats to rubber stamp application in an effort to clear the backlog, when in fact this type of action does what? Incent more abuse of the system itself. Said differently, the Liberals' breaking of the asylum system is a direct affront to the principles behind the 1951 Refugee Convention, which aimed to protect individuals fleeing true persecution. It was never meant to support economic migration. Today, thanks to the Liberals, many of the claimants in Canada's system are trying to claim asylum for reasons far beyond what the scope of the Geneva Convention imagined or proposed, and most are likely economic migrants. So we find ourselves here with the provisions in Bill C-12 today. The provisions outlined herein will undoubtedly face, without a question, charter challenges, and given the state of Canada's judiciary, are likely to be struck down by the courts. Consequently, considering the Liberal government's history of not appealing court rulings on immigration matters, as evidenced by the events that precipitated the current federal Bill C-3, this will probably result in further clogging of Canada's already overburdened judicial system and the continued deterioration of the asylum system. Advocacy groups have claimed that Bill C-12 may precipitate tens of thousands of court cases. The Refugee Law Lab, for example, in their report on provisions inherited from Bill C-2, highlights potential infringements on Charter Section 7 due to the one-year bar on refugee claims, as well as Section 15 on equality rights. This group has also suggested that it's doing what? Already planning empirical research for litigation. The Canadian Immigration Law Association suggested that because the immigration provisions in Bill C-12 could be challenged because of the Governor and Council powers for mass revocation of immigration statuses risks violating Section 7 by enabling arbitrary, politically motivated actions. Amnesty International, a coalition of other 300 organizations, etc., suggested that the bill should be challenged for potentially violating Section 8 of the Charter. For Bill C-2's similar provisions to Bill C-12, the federal government's charter statement asserts that any engagements are justified under Section 1 as proportionate for border security and safety. It also makes a bunch of other assertions and says everything is fine. Here's the thing. There is a vast gulf, a massively vast gulf between the legal lobbyists who don't want any sort of boundaries on the abuse of the asylum system because they are financially motivated to have endless appeals by a big glut of people coming in and abusing the asylum system, and what the Liberals are saying is going to be charter compliant. In fact, I was in Immigration Committee. I asked some of the department officials what they thought about the charter compliance of bills, the provisions in C-2 that are now in C-12, and they were fairly silent on the matter, which told me everything I need to know, that this is a Liberals' let the court sort it out later approach to a system that is massively broken, which will only further lead to abuse of the system without massive amendment and massive other actions to reduce the intake and incentivization of people to abuse the system. I can say one thing, though. This is definitely going to make lawyers and immigration consultants a lot richer. After the Liberals established a reputation for not challenging court rulings, as I said, the precipitation is now Bill C-3. The ruling that precipitated Bill C-3, an unmitigated chain migration bill, was never challenged by the Liberals. They didn't even challenge it. They didn't even bother to assert Parliament's supremacy on the laws that had been made in this place. They were like, nope, this is good. And now we have all of these other potential problems with Bill C-3. Now, after they refused to challenge that ruling, they're trying to say that all of these lobby groups and whatnot that are saying that this is not charter compliant, that they're somehow just going to magically accept that it is charter compliant and that this is going to somehow solve the problems, which I find ridiculous. The other thing, too, is that the Liberals have gone out of their way to eschew the validity of Section 33 of the Charter, right? So what they've essentially done with that is they said, okay, well, our history says not only are we going to challenge immigration rulings, we know that every other legal group in the country is saying this is going to review charter. They've also said, well, we're probably not going to do anything about it. So what they are doing with this bill, mark my words, I cannot wait to come back to this in the House in a few years from now, or whenever it may be, if this bill passes, and say I was right. Because what the Liberals are doing is punting this issue to the courts while the system is going to continue to get worse. Now, Mr. Speaker, The Economist magazine recently published an article entitled "Scrap the Asylum System, Build Something Better, Rich Countries Need to Separate Asylum from Labor Migration." I agree. Bill C-12 is silent on several other measures that could restore order and fairness to Canada's asylum system right now. For example, the Liberals should immediately undertake a system of wide review of the benefits that asylum claimants receive, particularly bogus asylum claimants, those with claims that have been found to have failed, with an eye to reduce benefits that those bogus asylum claimants receive, especially when they are benefits that Canadians themselves do not receive. For example, did you know, Mr. Speaker, that bogus asylum claimants get taxpayer-funded vision care through the interim federal health program? I know a lot of Canadians who don't get that. Years of taxpayer-funded hotel stays for bogus asylum claimants while Canadians make ends meet serves as a draw for system abuse. These types of benefits must be reviewed, and where possible, they must be curtailed to prevent the abuse and further draw into the system. Also, why is Canada at this juncture still accepting asylum claims originating from G7 and other safe third countries? The Liberal government needs to give its head a shake if they believe that someone who is arriving in Canada after having reached the safety of the United Kingdom, Germany, or Japan is fleeing persecution in the spirit of the Refugee Convention and should be allowed to stay in Canada for years and years on a pending claim, receiving taxpayer benefits like free hotel rooms. Also, Canada's laws regarding the removals of people with no legal right to be in Canada need to be what? Actually enforced. Canada needs timely removals, anonymized but publicly released departure tracking, and we need to know how this is getting done within the CBSA. While hearings in immigration tribunals must be conducted in a timely and efficient manner to ensure claimants receive a fair process, those who do not have valid claims must be swiftly removed from Canada if our laws require them to be. Otherwise, it just keeps incentivizing people to abuse the system because there is no disincentive for them not to. This could mean ensuring the detentions of offenders attempting to enter Canada undetected when conditions are met. Peace officers must be empowered to carry out their duties set out in the law, and national security warrants must be issued and executed in a way Canadians expect them to be. We have seen reports that the Liberals have allowed foreign nationals with known criminal histories into the country. New rules are needed to ensure those with serious criminal convictions are rendered inadmissible to our country. The Liberals also need to get serious on closing loopholes and backlogs that further overload the system and cause frustrating delays up and down the immigration system. Applications failing to the physical presence requirements, false information, and endless rights to appeal need to be modernized to ensure the system works for the folks who it is intended to serve, the world's most vulnerable. The existing inventory of asylum claims should be reviewed on a last-in, first-out basis, while the criteria for making new claims must be tightly narrowed to prevent the system from being abused by economic migrants. The Liberals could be pursuing new rules and engagement strategies for countries with high levels of asylum claims, particularly resulting from bogus asylum claims made by temporary resident visa holders whose visas have expired. Educational institutions that have profited off of massive and unsustainable amounts of foreign student visas could be made to pay fines and be held financially liable when their students on these permits make bogus asylum claims. And when the asylum claim backlog reaches a certain number of claims or approval rates, an automatic review of the system could be triggered to ensure that officials are not incentivized to rubber stamp applications as opposed to making thorough and consistent decisions. Asylum claimants could be made to prove that their claims were made in a timely manner, as opposed to that responsibility falling on the government or reverse onus. This would prevent fraudulent claims from being made long after someone arrived in Canada. Additionally, there are many reports of unscrupulous immigration consultants aiding and abetting the abuse of the Canada asylum system. The College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, shame on you for rejecting a request to appear in front of our committee. Shame on you. We will be re-inviting you. It is absolutely shameful what some of these consultants are doing. The fact that their executives left under mysterious circumstances and they're not coming to our committee, I think it's about time that these consultants maybe actually report to lawyers after all. Also, the government should pause the acceptance of new United Nations selected government-sponsored refugees and use those spots to find room for highly persecuted persons who are already in Canada and who the government has already made promises to, like those waiting for news through the Hong Kong Pathways program, or Ukrainians in Canada who the Liberals made a promise to and have failed. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, is that there are hundreds of millions of people who want to move to Canada, but we do not have the housing, healthcare, or jobs to support them all. So our immigration system must be fair and orderly to make consistent and smart decisions and prioritize, especially in the asylum system, the world's most vulnerable persons. The Liberals have moved us far away from that. In that context, with regard to the asylum system, careful decisions must be made to ensure that our asylum system prioritizes the world's most vulnerable, that it is immune to abuse, and fixes the mess that the Liberals have created. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have left? 30 seconds. I would just say this. The Liberal immigration minister has not answered any of these questions. She's put this bill out. It's been massively denigrated by all sides of the public, and she has not come up with a solution. I have solutions here. I've put them out, and I hope the minister will respond to some of these things in her speech, so I don't have to keep doing her job for her.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had to do some quick research when I was the critic for immigration. I remember this, and I'd like to give the member a quote. And I quote, that the European Union is the #1 source region for asylum claims to Canada, that Canada gets 98% of Hungarian asylum claims filed worldwide, and that about 95% of those claims are abandoned or withdrawn by the claimants themselves or subsequently rejected by our fair and generous Immigration and Refugee Board. This is from the former Minister of Immigration, Jason Kenney, when she had the opportunity to work with Jason Kenney directly, Mr. Speaker. Not only did they fail to rectify all the problems back then when they brought in refugee reform in terms of how you can, where we can get asylum seekers, then she has the tenacity to try to give the impression that what's taking place today is all to blame with the federal government, when I'm sure she knows that's not the case. Can she explain to me what role does the provinces play?
Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, hello, 15 years ago called and wants its immigration debate back. 15 years ago, the asylum system had less than 10,000 claims, thanks to our Conservative government. What happened, Mr. Speaker?
Order. We do have a point of order. The honourable member for Winnipeg North on a point of order.
10,000. I believe it's closer to 60,000 back in 2012.
Not a point of order. That's debate. The honourable member resume her answer.
Liberals want to silence me, but again, I got this information right off their website. Do they not know how to use the Google machine? It was less than 10,000 when they took government. Today, it's almost 300,000 after they hashtag welcome to Canada every economic migrant in the United States. This is insane. For him to say, like, I wish we had our former immigration minister back. This never would have happened. This never would have happened. This bill never would have been here. So now today, these guys better not punt this back off to the courts, and they better fix the system.
Question and commentary.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At the Standing Committee on Health, we worked on the toxic drug crisis, and many witnesses said that we need better framework around precursors to substances that help to make drugs such as fentanyl. I'd like to know what my colleague thinks about Section 2 of this bill that gives additional powers to the Minister of Health with respect to precursors.
The honourable member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
A couple of things. I'm speaking to the immigration provisions in this bill, so I will say that the impact that, even though my colleague mentioned health, the impact that the government's completely bananas and unsustainable levels of temporary residence and letting the asylum system get out of control has had on our health system needs to be measured, and it needs to be dealt with. With regard to fentanyl, I will note that the Canadian Border Services Agency this week issued a very important tweet about apprehending paper plates. I'm wondering what they're doing with fentanyl precursors.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Calgary, Crowfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I listened to her speech, and yes, 8 years ago, this government, through a deliberate choice of the Prime Minister, blew up the asylum system, and this conflation between economic migrants and asylum seekers through a choice made by the Prime Minister began. It's been 8 years, and I sense in her, we've been in opposition for the tenure of this government. This government then tables a solution, or it purports to table a solution in this bill to a problem we've spent 8 years trying to explain and been called horrible names and horrible things over the year. I wonder if she could really tell the House just how much credit does this government deserve for finally at least even tabling something to acknowledge the problem that they created.
The member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, in Greek mythology, there's a character called Cassandra. And she is somebody who is fated to know the future and have nobody believe her. Now, I know colleagues on this side believed me when I said that tweeting #Welcome to Canada and then rolling out a literal, actual red carpet at Roxham Road and then instructing the RCMP to help illegal border crossers with their baggage was going to be a problem with the asylum system. They didn't believe me, but here we are today. The Liberals created this mess. This bill is going to punt stuff to the court. I guarantee you it will. I guarantee you this is going to incentivize more response. They need to amend it. There needs to be better solutions. And they need to stop the incentivization of the abuse of the asylum system so that we can protect the world's most vulnerable.
Comments, Honourable Member for Sanish Gulf Islands.
Thank you, and an honourable colleague for Calgary Nose Hill. I'd love to dive into some of the refugee questions, but I know her knowledge of this place, and I wonder if she would agree with me that the change from C2 to C12 still leaves us with an omnibus bill. She's chosen to focus on the refugee portions, which I appreciate. I'm very concerned about the refugee portions of both C2 and now C12. They're almost the same. They've gotten rid of the warrantless access to private information from Canada Post and internet providers, but not the concerning parts. To the honourable member, when we have an omnibus bill like this, it means that one committee studies the whole bill. And would she agree with me it would be better to split this bill up so the Committee on Immigration only can study and call witnesses on the immigration portions of this bill?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Where I'll agree with my colleague is that what we've seen with the Liberals in their omnibus bills is that they consistently want to push a narrative to Canadians that somehow Canadians have to sacrifice their civil liberties in order for the government to fix messes of their own making, okay? I think that the immigration provisions that are in this bill, I think what the Liberals have done is they have purposely designed a bill to punt this issue off to the courts so that they can somehow skate through while the system continues to get worse. That's not going to help. I encourage people who have viewpoints on this issue, experts in the field, to either refute or support my hypothesis and also come up with constructive ways to help parliamentarians modernize the Immigration, Refugee and Protection Act so we can protect the world's most vulnerable people, restore order and fairness to the system, and stop the incentivization of the abuse of our once fair and wonderful asylum system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question on commentary. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Speaker, the point that I'm trying to get across to the member is that at the end of the day, there were changes that were made under Jason Kenney because of a serious issue back in 2012, 2011, 2010. And which happened to be the same time in which her leader was a part of that government, Mr. Speaker. The then government had to deal with asylum that hit 60,000 in claims in 1 year. Now, fast forward it. We have a situation because of a number of factors, some of them beyond the federal government's control, that dictate that we again make changes. Would she not agree? In order to protect the integrity of the system, yes, C12 will address the issue.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Since we're going through history, Jason Kenney, bless him, had to impose a visa on Mexicans because of the level of bogus asylum claimants that we were seeking. What did the Liberals do as soon as they came into office? What did they do? Immediately reversed it. And now, after that, there have been over 60,000 asylum claims. Gee, whose fault was that? Was it Jason Kenney who reversed the visa? No, it was these guys. Come on. You know what? I am so tired of these guys trying to say that anything that they just try to absolve themselves of responsibility after 10 years of mess. No, Conservatives have better plans, better ideas to restore order, compassion and fairness to Canada's immigration system, and that's what we're going to do.
Question on commentary.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to customs officers, we need 2,000 to 3,000 more border agents in order to be able to properly protect our border. Does my colleague think that we have enough staffing to meet the requirements in the bill?
I am so glad my colleague brought this up because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the magical missing promised more border agents, right? These guys keep getting up, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals are like, we're going to promise 1,000 more border agents. They keep making this announcement and they're not hiring anybody. I just, like, what an utterly inept and disastrous government. Canadians deserve something better. They deserve conservative policies that restore order, restore fairness, actually deliver on promises, and will, again, make sure that immigration is focused on integrating people into Canadian economic and social fabric at a pace that matches housing, healthcare, and jobs. Thank you.
We have time for a very brief question. The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will listen to the speech with great interest. I guess a quick question for her is, there are 3 million temporary people in Canada right now. Does this bill solve that problem, or is there something else that needs to be done, and what suggestions does she have?
Now, member for Calgary-Nose Hill, an equally brief response.
Yeah, I cannot believe that the Liberals brought in 3 million temporary residents in such a short period of time. Absolutely bananas, insane, crazy, broke the immigration system. This bill doesn't fix that. Wow, what is a disaster.